live now, and we'll be recording it as well.
Okay, cool.
It's right now, so it's going live.
Okay, all right. Good morning, councillors. Welcome to have you all here this morning by way of Zoom. I apologise, my coverage CBD in Taupo is not over particularly good, so if I do cut in and out, please bear with me, and I might ask Christine if you take over at that stage. But
Sure.
So thank you very much. I don't think we have apologies from anyone. I see Kirsty's here. All the councillors are here. So right, continuation with our annual plan exercise or progress. Probably hand over to you, to Gareth, to outline what where we're up to and where we're heading to now.
Sure. So I'm pretty much going to throw the ball over to Alan to lead us through for this morning's session. We've got an hour set down now, and then another hour this afternoon. And I think it's we deliberately put it into those two bits because it's obviously quite full-on stuff to go through. Today, obviously, we're going through our operational budget, so looking across the line at our operational expenditure, proposed operational expenditure. Just as a starting point, I'd say this is new to us. We've never ever let or had councillors go through line by line the operational budgets like this before. So you're the first councillors in the history of Taupo District Council to get to this level of detail. But doing it because we're in extraordinary circumstances, obviously, in terms of COVID. And so the normal process would be that as a council, you would set the projects that you want to complete. You know, so you'd go through a capital works program and tell us what projects you want us to do. You would then tell us what levels of service through a long-term plan. In fact, you'd tell us what levels of service you want us to provide. And then we would come back to you with, therefore, this is what it's going to cost to do through the staff areas and the other associated areas. So generally, you don't, in the first term councillors won't appreciate it, but generally you wouldn't get the information that you've had or have the conversation that we're going to have over the next couple of hours. But I think it is important that we do it, given the extraordinary circumstances that we're in. A couple of cautions, I guess, and that is that obviously some of those lines are relating directly to staff. And so we are live, and I think that's the right thing to do because it's the transparent way of doing it. However, obviously when we're dealing with staff, there's human resource process and procedure that we need to do, and we need to obviously respect people's privacy and their staff's privacy and their job protection. We don't want people to find out information through a live session like this, which they should have the ability to have a conversation with their employer about. So from time to time, you might see me caution us as we go through that, and if we need to go offline, then please let's do that at a future date. If we need to get into any of those specifics. But I think there's enough that we can talk about today at that sort of higher level to be able to protect people's privacy, your worship. So I guess with those opening remarks, I'll probably just hand over to Alan to start working us through.
Yep, cool. Thanks, Gareth. Just reminding everyone if I could have it on mute. I get quite a bit of feedback. I don't know about everyone else. You can hear everything that's going on behind. So just everyone have it on mute, unless when you take it off mute, I know you want to say something. So that's awesome. So thanks, Alan.
Okay. Fortunately, I've got Neil Ward and John Caldwell here to back me up for some of your difficult questions that you possibly come up with. You would all received what I sent out to you yesterday, and where I'm going to start is on the revenue page. So if you can access that to start with. Okay, you'll see that we are budgeting $2 million less revenue for 2021 than we budgeted for in the current financial year. There's a range of things in there. Based on our discussion yesterday, we have pulled back a bit on the level of rates penalties and other fines of a similar nature. But the overall movement is driven by the levels of activity. For example, the Investment income, for example, with the cash rate at 0.25%, we've lowered our expected yield on our general funds to just 2.2%. So you can see there that there's a $604,000 reduction in general funds interest. If we look at some of the other areas like building consent fees, what we've experienced this year has been a positive experience versus budget. So what we've said is, okay, based on what the current level of activity has been and what we, after talking to local construction scene, we've actually dropped our projections 20% on what we're currently experiencing, which only works out about 10% on the budget, because we're exceeding the budget because of the level of activity. So there's some broader assumptions sitting behind some of those other revenue lines as well. So at this particular stage, rather than drill down into each of those particular lines, is there any questions that people have got in respect of the revenue is concerned? Revenue
Ellen,
projection.
Ellen, can I just say, you're unable to share that on your screen? We've obviously.
I can't.
Okay. So everyone's looking at their iPads, no doubt.
Maybe Neil, can you assist in that regard?
Yes, I'll share that presently. I'll just do that now.
Yeah. Okay, that'll be cool. And then,
David, could I just ask
Yep,
a
John.
very quick question? Thank you, Alan. I've printed these papers off, and I've got to apologise. I was out of the district yesterday, so I haven't spent much time on it. I just want clarification in regards to the revenue and the figures given, rate penalties, rate remissions. If we refer back to the 1920 budget, which is referred to there, should there be an extra zero, or should it be 66.5? It looks like 665 is total rates.
What we've got there is the rates remissions less the level of penalties.
Yeah, yes, I see that, and they confirm with the 1920 budget. It's just the rate reads there as total rates, which are going to be more than 665,000.
Okay, so that's not rates that we're showing there, John. That's a poor wording on the total there. Those two line items there is just the rates penalties and the rates remissions. So we don't actually show rates at all on the screen. So we're just looking at the other revenue lines.
And it also doesn't show the internal rates, less internal rates, which it did in the 1920 budget.
Yes, okay. So perhaps I clarify what's on the actual screen. I guess we're going through what we are the relevant line items. So this is in what we call as we've said at the top there, a statement of cash revenue. We haven't put it in the formal GAAP presentation that you'd see in an annual report. So
I wonder, Neil, just to help, because otherwise I think the conversation is likely to get quite scattered around the place. I wonder if we don't just, and I know, Alan, we sort of went for questions, but if we just sort of quickly go through, dare I say it, line by line, Neil, and just a quick 2-second conversation about what each one is, and then what the change is compared to last year.
yeah, I think that's good, Neil. And the way you're hovering over the figure you're talking about is good too. Councillors comfortable what they're seeing now? Like as in how you?
Yep.
Yep,
Yes.
yep, cool. Yeah, it's a lot better having it in front of you. So, no, that's cool. Thanks, Neil.
Yep. Okay. Alan, did I can drive the mouse and you can talk if you like.
Okay. Right. So if we get into as you can see in the notes side, there's a lot of the reasons for the movement is described.
Yep.
And that's quite helpful, because when you look at, for example, the grants received, the first thing that springs to mind is, gee, why are we receiving so much more in grants in the 2021 year versus the 1920? And as you can see, it's related to Ironman. We're predicting the additional funding for that particular event. So that's the major reason why that's showing as a significant positive. When we get into the fees and charges, as we move down, you can see that's very much related to activity through the AC bars, the level of activity right across the district, and that flows through to the application fees, the building consents, the sales down significantly. One of the sales items there, that the 500,000 lost revenue from new harvesting contract, that's where we spread the treated wastewater out over Rakanui Road, etc. Then we've had it harvested and we've had income. Offsetting that's about, from memory, about 370,000 in expenses that we save. So on the other side of the ledger, even though we've had a drop of 500,000 in revenue, we've had a saving of about 370,000 or thereabouts in expenses. So that's just a change in the management of that particular part of the operation. And you know, Kevin, if you want to comment on that, just feel free.
No, all good on that one. You covered that well. We've had a change of operation there. If I can, though, I'll just bring your eyes up to line 18, 318, 1318 connections there. It's only 22,000, but it's just for information for the elected members. This is something that we're predicting the same amount of connections to come through. But what we've done is we've held the fees and charges the same as the previous year. Contractually, we are paying more for that. So what we don't collect here, we have to go and taken out of our current maintenance budget. So it's just for your information, like, because we held the fees and charges the same as the previous year, it actually is costing us, and we're having to go into our maintenance funds for that as such.
So as I said earlier, we're budgeting for a 20% reduction in the building consent fees. We are predicting a 25% downturn in the revenue from facilities, AC bars, etc. And as a result of that, you can see the significant reduction in fees and charges. It'd be great to be able to be accurate in our projections, but it's a bit like an economist trying to forecast what the future holds.
Sorry, Alan, sorry to interrupt. Just I didn't quite take in the 500k lost harvesting contract, the bailage. What was the quick reason for that? Sorry.
Change in our business operation. Kevin was just touching on that.
Kev, why are we going to be 500k down on that? Sorry.
Because we don't sell that ourselves now. We've put it out through a contract, and the contract does that. So that offsets some of our maintenance costs in our maintenance area.
So theoretically, the contract will reflect that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we got a good price. So yeah, we're on a win from what we.
So there's a corresponding reduction, yeah.
Okay, it's the same.
Again, this is one of the risks of getting into the operational budgets, because it's quite
it's good to know, because that was always a good revenue, and if people ask us, we need to know. Yeah, so no, that's all right. Cool.
But there was a cost to doing the business, and we've got that cost saving.
Yeah, so bounces it out. Yeah. Okay. Carry on. Thanks.
That's the challenge of looking line by line, just at revenue, and then looking at costs separately.
Yeah. No, we're quite enjoying this.
Yeah. So then we move on.
You might be enjoying it, Your Worship. Don't get used to it. This is extraordinary circumstances, and I can feel the wrath of CEOs past on my shoulders. So don't get used to it.
Yeah. So then we've got what I talked to earlier, the reduced return on our investments. As you can see, that's a significant amount, but it's really related to what the deposit market is offering at the moment. Then if we move down, we've budgeted for less in the area of petrol tax. As you can see, we're guessing that the level of regional travel and activity. Be great if we had a lot more domestic movement and they were filling up in the Taupo region. The rest of it, you can see that we've dropped the fines on the parking. That was coming out of the discussion that we held earlier in the week. And whatever decision we make in those areas, we need to budget for the outcome.
I guess philosophically, what we generally do as staff is try and be quite conservative in terms of our budgeting of income. So if we over budget at this point, then and it doesn't actually eventuate, that leaves us a hole, as we get through the year. So yeah, we generally try and be quite conservative in terms of this part of the ledger.
So, as I said at the beginning, that leaves us a $2 million shortfall in revenue compared with the current year. So, to start off with, that's the amount of income we need to offset as far as the movement in our expenses, just to try and break even.
Through the chair.
Yep, John.
Thank you, Alan. Just wondering, I'm probably going to confuse myself, not to mention confuse everybody else with regarding the line forwarding with subsidies. John Mack and I were in a conversation with Brent regarding the waste management strategy going forward. The government's currently consulting on proposals to increase the levy to $50 or $60 a tonne, which would, if that was, I know we can't put something that's just been considered, and you're obviously having to be conservative, but going through into the annual plan, I'm not sure where the consultation process is with its next year. I understand it would actually result in an increase of about 600,000 per annum into the revenue. Is that something that's obviously not being considered, or you can't consider it to set in the annual plan, but where do you see that fitting in at some stage? Obviously, if that process is adopted by government.
Yeah, the offset of that is that they're keeping pushing up the price of under the emission trading scheme as to the our cost in that regard. That used to be $25 a tonne, is now going up to $35 a tonne, and if they increase this, they're likely on the other side of the ledger to look at the emission trading scheme. So what we've done here is just budgeted for what we know, and the time frame for some of those things that you've just mentioned, John, it's hard to define. So as I say, when we do the budget, we'd rather base it on today's knowledge rather than today's projections.
Absolutely, I understand that. Yeah, I just thought I'd just throw it out there. That's thanks for clarifying that anyway for the other members as well. Thank you.
So any other questions on the revenue lines?
If I may again, Alan.
Yeah, sure.
Just very quickly in regards to the line to do with subsidies and grants, under the paper before us, that subsidies and grants are stated 1920 budget of 2.3 mil. The actual 1920 plan says 5 mil. Is there a reason for that difference?
Yeah, I'll cover that one off if you like. As I said earlier, and John, what we've presented here is what we're calling I'd probably be more accurate to refer to it as a rate requirement view versus an annual plan or annual report view. So the main difference that you're seeing there between those two numbers is what we call the capital revenues on the NZTA grants. So we get subsidies from the NZTA for our capital program and our renewal program, but those don't affect the rate requirement. So it's deemed to be capital revenues under generally accepted accounting practices and our requirements. We have to disclose those through an annual report. What we've tried to do with this exercise today is purely focus on things that impact on the rate line, So hence you will see a couple of differences to the annual plan as you go through, and then you've quite rightly pointed out one of them there.
So effectively, if our operating budget is you point here, 2.3, but in the annual plan for 2021, it's going to be 2.8. Would that be an increase rather than a decrease? Have I got my figuring wrong?
Yeah, that's an increase, and it's related to that subsidy from the related to Ironman.
Yeah, so there's a one-off extraordinary item in this year's plan, Councillor, which is, as Alan said, the MB grant, but that's offset by cost, which we'll see when we go through the expenditure lines.
All right, thank you.
So can I just ask through the chair, have we actually seen, like you're saying on the building consent fees, reduced forecast, have we seen anything to date that shows that people are actually have either pulled consents that they might have had in, or that they are actually not going to build? Because I still think these are projects that people would probably still go with, but that's quite a lot of a downturn. Do you actually see that happening?
The budget there is about 10% down on the previous year's budget. We've been talking to the industry. We have taken the approach that they've got in the main probably 6 to 9 months of solid work ahead of them. We're in the process of still settling on a couple of developments as far as sale of council land for future housing as well. And just talking to the industry, that's basically given us the feeling that a 10% reduction on that particular plan, or a 20% reduction on what we're actually experiencing, is probably a conservative but sensible way of approaching it.
So I guess, John, it looks at what we've had in the past. So in a normal year, and then the team sort of looking at what's around, and what, as Alan says, what the industry is talking about. It sort of gives an educated guess. But look, I would be stoked if the interventions that we put in place mean that we don't reduce our building consent activity to that level. But again, financially we're better to under budget here in terms of that income line, rather than set our goals too high, and then if we don't meet them, we've then got the deficit at the end of the year. There's a worse financial position for us to be in.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think talking to the industry, builders, contractors, all that sort of thing, I think you're pretty close to the mark there, Alan. I think we've got plenty of work for the next 8 to 9 months, but it's that final end, early next year will be when the kick-in comes. But I think you're pretty close there. As Gareth said, it'd be great to be within what the old figures were. But what are you hearing down there, John? Are you hearing, is building activity still going, or?
Yeah, nothing that I've seen has changed, to be honest with you, because I know some builders, and again, they're on a smaller scale, but you're right, they're always looking for business, but nobody so far has been saying, oh, this has affected us. But again, we haven't had that kick through yet as to, the subsidies stopping for wages, etc. So again, it's a guess at the moment, but so far I think it's still quite positive.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thanks, Alan. Expenses.
Okay, expenses. When we start looking at expenses, there's two types of expenses. There's some that are relatively fixed costs, and some that are variable costs. So if we look at the first section, and you can see we've got the personnel costs, they sort of fall into more the fixed cost sort of area, where if we, for example, well, you can see we've budgeted for a 0 increase, in fact, a slight decrease. And in a general year, we're not going to be, well, let's put it this way, whenever we get a resignation, we actually look at the tasks that person was doing to see whether we can allocate them to other areas of the business. So it's just not an automatic, someone walks out the door, we hire. So there's a lot of activity that occurs behind that. But if we look at those indirect employee costs, things like ACC is tied back into that fixed cost of personal cost. So we can't do anything in that particular area. But if you look at a lot of those other ones, they are discretionary expenditure. And you can see that we have basically made a just about a 50% reduction in the expenditure through those discretionary areas.
So, Your Worship, I was wondering, what I'd like to do is, we've got the personnel costs there, which is obviously staff salaries, the first line there. In terms of that, there's a couple of philosophical things which I'm happy to talk about. And then I think what I'm going to ask us to do is to park that conversation a wee bit and park it until we certainly will come back to it. So I'm not saying that we're not going to have the conversation, but you'll appreciate that the staff cost is largely dependent on it's back to our normal way of doing things, is largely dependent on the projects that you put in. So at the moment, we've had to make some guesses, and we made some guesses on what the decisions you're going to be making, particularly Thursday or next week, are going to be, and around projects and around, in fact, around maintenance costs and stuff like that later on today as well. So it's a little bit of a holding pattern there at the moment, and that it potentially will change depending on those decisions. But philosophically, in terms of that staff line, is that the other thing that I'll say before I get into philosophical stuff actually is that some of the other decisions that you, and I'm saying this sensitively, so you will know what I'm talking about, but some of the other decisions that you've made on Tuesday obviously have an impact on this line as well, and that there's additional staff costs going to come into this line for a period of time, and particularly through a transition period as we move out of that. I know that sounds a little bit cryptic, but I'm sure that you can pick up what I'm trying to say there. But philosophically, in terms of this line, we have made some savings on the offset, and just to sort of talk about them in general terms, an example of that would be, as you know of, in this financial year, I'll be taking a 10% pay cut over that 12 months. So it's a 20% over 6 months, as per the government has done. We've put the wage freeze in place. So normally we budget for a 2% wage increase for all of our employees. Our unions very nicely have agreed to a wage freeze and to forego what is contractually they're entitled to in terms of an increase there. And that was a negotiation. They are contractually entitled to that. As Ellen said, we've got a recruitment freeze in place at the moment. That won't continue. There will be the need to replace some positions, and if you take some specified roles, think of lifeguards or you think of water technicians, etc., you need people with specific skills to do those jobs. So it won't be a strict recruitment freeze for the whole period, but as Ellen talked about, when a position becomes available or vacant, we look at that entire position and how it can be, the tasks can be done in other ways. And an example of that, again, without breaching any privacy issues, an example of that will be, most of you will be aware that our senior reserves planner, Nathan Murray, left just recently, and we won't be replacing that role. We're divvying those tasks up amongst probably about 5 other staff within the organisation. So they get those additional tasks to do. Some of that, of course, then means that there's additional funding requirements for those people that take new tasks on through higher duties or through resizing of jobs. The way that the process has to work is that when you get new tasks, then your job gets resized and potentially you get more pay because of that. So that's where it's not a direct one-for-one type of easy mathematical equation. And then obviously through some of the reshuffles that we have talked about on Tuesday and that the leadership team have worked through over the last weeks, there will be some changes through redundancies and our annual leave entitlements and requirements that we have when people exit the organisation. So again, that needs to be accounted for in this line. So that's a long way of saying that what we've done here is an educated guess at this point. It is less than what is previous, which is unusual. Normally it would build up and at least a 2% increase and generally more, and it was looking to be a whole lot more. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that philosophical stuff, but would ask your worship that we wait and come back to it after we know what the capital and we've gone through the rest of the budgets, because that will determine again what that line looks like.
Okay. Thanks, Gareth. Appreciate that. So perhaps we, good idea to come back to that at some stage. Unless there's any direct questions of Gareth now relating to what he's just said. No. Okay. Thanks, Ellen. We'll go on to administration, general administration costs.
I think your worship, let's go back up again, Neil.
Oh yeah.
I think you can. So you can go through. So the ACC levy, as Ellen said, we can't touch that. But from there on, staff clothing onwards, you can talk about. There's no reason why you can't talk through that. Just to be really open. I'd love for you to miss some lines, but there's no need to.
Yeah. Okay, no problems. It's all pretty self-explanatory there, but if you want to whip through that, Ellen, if there's anything there.
Well, can I just say that this is creating quite a management challenge to the extent that we've elevated a lot of the decision making on these particular lines to SLT instead of the people further down in the organisation, because you take, for example, training. There's legislative requirements there, but we've been spending up towards $500,000 on training, and we've cut that back significantly. So being able to manage that is a bit of a challenge. Some of those other lines, like the freeze on recruitment, there's a significant saving in recruitment costs, but it's easy to do it at the budget level. It's a lot more challenging to actually manage it as an organisation and change the whole focus and culture of the staff towards a year of extreme measures. So
So that's why I wanted to focus on those lines a little bit as well, just so that you're aware of them, because there's outworkings of all of this. There's impacts of these decisions. So I certainly want councillors to be aware of the work that we've done in here and the impact that these things will have on the whole organisation and the business, it's inevitable and it's the right thing to do at this current time, but each of these will have an impact.
Can I just, through the chair, look, I think as a councillor, and I'm not speaking for everybody, but what you're doing here is brilliant, to be honest with you, and I don't think any of us would want you to do anything that would impact the staff where you then feel it's not going to work. I think when I'm looking at these figures, I'm believing everything that you're telling us is the best that you guys can do for us in these times. So certainly if you said to me, look, it's still going to cost us a certain amount for training, etc., I would be the first to say, well, we have to spend it. I don't think any of us would believe that we shouldn't. I just think what you're doing is great, that it's transparent and you're trying your best. And to be honest with you, what I see is I believe everything that you're telling us, that you're doing the best that you can.
Yeah.
So thank you, John. And I guess what the reason for my labouring the point is that this will have an impact. So to take the training as an example, this is the bare minimum that we have to do to meet legislative requirements. To be able to retain our accreditation as a building consent authority, as an example, we need to have some training budget there to do the bare minimum. But what this will do is that it means that all of the nice to have type work that we do is stopped. Okay, so that obviously has an impact, and the way that we've looked at it is that this is a 1 year pause. It's not sustainable in the long term. I'll put that out to you. It's unsustainable to be running an organisation with 330,000 people and have a $180,000 training budget. All of the
You haven't got 330,000 people.
320 people, sorry, not 30,000. All of the percentages that you see, that just doesn't work. But for a 1 year pause, what we've said is that yes, this will be pain, but we're aware that everybody's feeling pain right now, and we need to make that 0%. So it's a long way. There is an impact, but the philosophy that we've taken is doing the minimum that we need to do to stay out of jail and to stay okay. It's not, normally we strive for best practice. This definitely is not best practice.
Kathy?
Thank you, through the chair. Having run 2 large businesses with over 300 staff during a GFC, I applaud what you're doing, Gareth, and the team. It's very difficult, but I know that we have to do this, unfortunately. And I would just like to personally say that I think that what you've done to look at a reduction of $2 million is a huge effort. Not to mention, when you're only getting a minimum of, the variance of $2 million, and then having to look at cutting your expenses and your cloth to meet that. It's a difficult job as a CEO, and I applaud the senior leadership team because they're carrying a huge weight on their shoulders at the moment. And I concur with everything that John has said. So I think we need to be very, very mindful that, as you said, it is not sustainable, and that this is something that hopefully is only a 12-month that we're facing.
Kathy, you're dead right there, and the challenge is going to be maintaining the culture, but the advantage we do have is every night on TV you see this business closing down, that business closing down. It's totally just times that we've never experienced before. So hopefully everyone buys into it, and I'm glad you say it's interim. Measure until the borders open and all that sort of thing, or at least a year anyway. So Christine, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do. Through you, David, I absolutely agree with all the other comments. And what we have to bear in mind is that there will be an impact on services, for example, and we have to defend that. There will be the people who complain about everything, who will have lists of complaints about things that are not done, and we have to be ready to defend that, because we're doing this for the ratepayers of this district. And look, there is a price to pay, and we couldn't do this for more than a year, or the effects, I've seen the effects, like Kathy, having a big business where you do these things when you're forced to, you can't maintain them for too long, or the result is dire.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Christine. Yep.
Okay. So you can see as we move down into accommodation and meals, now some of these lines include you as councillors as well. So it's not just the staff. So we've made a 80% reduction in accommodation and meals. That's pulled right back. Advertising, I'll let Lisa talk to this one.
Thanks, Lisa.
And this will be one, just before Lisa starts, this is one that I want you guys to be totally over, because it will have an impact on what we do. And it's one of those ones that from a PR perspective, you're always asking us to do more. We're not going to be able to if you agree with the budget that Lisa's done here. So it's, again, the bare minimum, same philosophy that we've had with those other things.
Thanks, Gareth. So given that advertising is one of the more discretionary activities that we undertake, the team and I applied some principles on that bare minimum approach to doing this budget. So it's important to point out that 234,600 actually includes the 100K that is going to DGLT to partner with Ruapehu District Council to advertise the mountain. The other 135K proposes no radio advertising, no ratepayers newsletters, reducing Connect to 1 publication per month, and it also includes public notice advertising we're required to do under legislation, which, while they're small, they're very expensive. It also means any job advertising will now be online only on the likes of Seek and Trade Me, but again, given the fact that we're largely in a recruitment freeze, that probably won't have too much effect. It will mean we'll have to bargain hard with the media agencies, and it'll be a case of lowest price wins, essentially. So in short, it's a bare minimum budget with a large digital focus. Happy to take any questions.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. With the public notices, the applicant, like road closures and that sort of thing, does the organisation pay for that? Does the applicant pay for that?
I believe it is charged back, Your Worship. Yes.
Yeah, charged back. Okay, cool.
Would have
Okay,
been-
so
some of them are, Your Worship, and they would be shown in the income up above.
yeah, okay, cool.
Through the chair.
John.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. This is probably one area, like obviously, notwithstanding the difficult times, it's a no-brainer that we're having to resort to this. Definitely, as people are suggesting in their interim, but we talk about connection and communications with the community. We're going to be sort of severely compromising that facility, that ability. So I do have some concerns about that. By going to this sort of draconian, seems like a draconian level, appreciating that we have to look at them line by line. So I'm just expressing my concerns. That's all.
Through the chair, I concur with John. People seem to think we don't communicate with them enough as it is, and we all know education is key. So, yeah, this to me seems quite light, considering the 100K is for a particular campaign.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I think we just got to be mindful, though, that you're looking at the news media outlets and all the rest of it. They've all fallen over, and the fact that we're going to get less newspapers, etc. And I do think that depending on how we work it, I know everybody's not on social media, but most people do have mobile phones, etc., and they do have the capability. It's just whether or not they use it. And I think, based on Turangi as an example, and I have to ask you for the figures on this, but I'm not sure that many people go to the TDC site for information. We do share it, I have to say, and Turangi gets most of its information through our social media from shared TDC posts. So I think that could be the key, is we'll still get those posts, as you say, not as many and only online, but it's how we then diversify and send them out to people. That's the communication side.
Dave,
You would
can
have
I just make-
noticed, sorry,
Dave, can I
just through Your Worship, just in response to that, John, you would have noticed that we started a digital e-newsletter over the lockdown period, which has proved to be very popular, and we're getting quite a number of subscriptions to that on a daily basis. So that was one vehicle we introduced to try and fill that gap with the newspapers.
What this does, Your Worship, is
John,
if you...
Sorry, yep.
What this does, so it's most of the savings, and Lisa will better correct me if I'm wrong, we'll go into detail, but on the local radio at the moment, most ad breaks you'll hear public awareness, education, advertising for things like what goes down the lake ends up in the what goes down the grate ends up in the lake, road safety messaging, a whole raft of different things. You go to the movie theatres and that's on at the start in terms of civil defence messaging, etc. It's that type of thing that would be that severely cut, if not disappear, probably disappear out of this, Lisa, isn't it? All that stuff is gone.
Correct.
We've maintained the Councillors Connect in the newspaper, but no other advertising in there. And then that's right, eh? Yeah.
Reduced to once a month. Yeah.
Once a month. So it's really pulling that down. The social media stuff that continues, and that's probably the more cost efficient way for us to do that piece of work. So it's really about replacing that with this.
John Boddy.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Just like to make a comment. Firstly, in regards of what senior leadership have been doing, I've advocated some time ago when we were discussing where our debt levels are going to be in the future, about when things change, you change to meet the changes, and I think we're doing that. And in regards to the advertising, it's not so much what we do, it's how we do it. It's a bit like a lot of things in life. You work out how can you do it smarter to get the same result. And we talked about advertising. I always watch or read the Local Government New Zealand's website, and down one side they have job availabilities. So I'm not sure whether we're paying anything for that, Lisa, but there are other ways to do what we're doing for the same results.
And that's what this budget is based on, John.
Tom, did you want to say something?
Correct.
Yeah, Your Worship, just really backing up what John says, I mean, from a Turangi perspective, or actually from all of community perspective, I mean, during the lockdown, social media online has been the only real form of communication. So I think, that's the future way, isn't it? Is the digital stuff. So the more we can encourage it and utilize that, I guess it starts to direct people towards that. I appreciate there might be some people isolated that might have read paper, but I think the vast majority will go that way.
Yeah, Kathy?
Yes, I would agree that I just think that it's up to us as well as councillors to be able to pass on information and disseminate it out into our specific portfolios and regions. And I think that, you know, advertising is an important part of what we do, and I think that the public need to understand that advertising isn't about selling, it's about more information dissemination. One of the things, Lisa, I just wanted to clarify, when you talk about advertising the mountain, I assume that you're talking about driving visitation to our region, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
That's a tourism initiative that DGLT and RDC are going to connect and deliver.
So that's for the winter campaign to drive visitors to Taupo and to...
Correct.
Just to confirm though, we haven't got that in here. So that's been taken out already.
No, that is part of the 235.
Oh, okay. I thought we were taking that out. So we've got this year's 100, which is we're currently in the process of committing. So here's a decision point for council: is do you want to still have that extra 100,000 in there? That initially that 100,000 was spent was tagged to the eastern seaboard of Australia. So it's when we did that work with Flight Centre, etc., to get people over for winter. So it's not given to DGLT. It was in association with Tourism New Zealand and Ruapehu District Council and Ruapehu Alpine Lifts. For this year, we've got 100,000 in this year's budget as well. We've repurposed that, and that's obviously now no longer going to be spent in Australia, given the borders are shut, but spent on the Come to Taupo campaign. So the Come to the Central Plateau, Come Skiing campaign. So re-tagged into a domestic marketing element. I guess the question here is, I thought we'd taken that 100K out, but the question here is, do you still want to do that for the next year?
Well, that was our partnership with Ruapehu District Council. They were putting in 50K, I think, when they, Gareth. Yeah. So I think we understood at the start. So 234 less the 100K leaves you 134 for Leases advertising budget, basically. So everyone understands that, eh? I guess we can get back to that in a minute, Gareth. You know, as far as me concerned, I'm very comfortable with what you proposed here, Lisa, because, you know, I'm a classic boomer. I was a Dominion every day, you know, person, and I brought the Sunday papers even the weekend. I actually I just chucked them out. You know, it was $8 down the Google. People are just, as John Max said, just people revert to social media and whatever we can do, and that's all no charge for us, pretty much. So I think, you know, even myself have changed my habits as far as that's concerned. So I take what John Williamson, Johnny Dub, you know, says about that sort of thing. But, you know, people just don't. I think people certainly change, no matter what demographic they are, have changed their way of communication. But Gareth, on the 100K.
Sorry, can I just make, through the chair, I complete confidence in Lisa and her capabilities on delivering the messages, but I still take a point of difference there. Disagree, I don't agree completely, but that's just my point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Quick question for me when you're ready, Your Worship.
Yep, sure. Just going on to the 100K, you know, I know it was a, you know, partnership model with Ruapehu. They're really desperate. You know, they are a smaller council and all that sort of thing. Not that we need to be propping them up. I think that sent bring the visitation to the Central Plateau. It was a slightly different sort of angle than what DGLT have been undertaking. So I would still like to see that happen if possible, but up to you guys. Kevin, KT.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just in response to that, we've been marketing ourselves as the hub and the gateway to the Central Plateau, so I think we're kind of obliged to do that. But going back to a comment Gareth made before regarding the target for some of the advertising revenue around what gets flushed ends up in the lake and road safety stuff, I wonder if this is an opportunity for us to have a look at a baseline now, and then having reduced the spend on those items going forward, and at the end of this, have a look at what, if any, impacts have occurred. There may actually be some savings long term in this.
Absolutely.
Potentially,
Yeah.
potentially some of those would be hard to measure, like what goes down the grate ends up in the lake would be hard to I was trying to think how you'd do that KPI. That some of the others would be easier, but yeah, we can certainly look at that.
Actually, I'm just thinking about that.
Like
Yeah.
that one, for example, the number of blockages, the number of times we need to respond and clear up all the rubbish that people put down the drains where they shouldn't. Now compared to in a year's time, if it's ballooning out of control, well then clearly there is some sense that we're having an impact with advertising. If it makes no difference at all, then you have to question, was that money worth spending in the first place? That's all I'm getting at.
Through the chair, David, or not David, Gareth, if it, that 100K for that campaign sitting in the comms advertising budget, I mean, it's a budget. We're not specifically saying to DGLT, go and spend 100K on this, isn't it? We want this campaign, the circa is sort of this, we'll pay for it. And if that, say it was like 82K, does the 18 go stay with Lisa?
So look, that's the philosophy that we have with all of our cost centre managers, and you know, the budget is not a target, and generally that's why at the end of the year we come in underspent on all of these things. So you know, your budget for a pair of shoes, a pair of work boots at $150, you go and buy the best pair of work boots that you can find, and if that's $120, that's what you spend.
Yeah, so it sits in the comms budget, and if there was anything, any savings or money that didn't need to be spent out of that sort of tagged 100K, would it just stay in the comms budget, is what I'm saying?
Yes and no. I mean, it goes to the bottom line at the end of the day. So yeah, it's not we don't direct attribute those savings back through. So it wouldn't then mean that we can spend more in the comms budget per se, no.
I would be, through the chair, I would be reluctant to cut some of our public messaging, because I think that particularly marketing for anything is about frequency. And there's no point doing it, you know, for 1 or 2 or 3 times. It has to be a consistent message going out there. So anything to do with public health, public safety, I think is imperative that it stays.
Through the chair, I'd absolutely support that, Kathy.
I think adding in the lake safety there as well too.
Okay, Lisa, can you do that for 130K?
No.
No, I can't.
That's the point. So this is why we don't go line for line normally, because it's we can't get to an agreement with you. But but no, we can't, frankly, and that's why what we've given to you again, without labouring the point, is the bare minimum. So it doesn't include that. If you want to do that, you need to put some more money back in, which you can do. That's your right. But then to achieve your target of 0%, be aware that we're going to need to take it out somewhere else.
Okay.
So just through the chair, I'm just asking Lisa then, because obviously it's Lisa's thing. Do you feel comfortable, Lisa, if we did this cut, that we actually would still get stuff, you know, enough out there for the year, being that it's a difficult year, or do you feel that it's a little bit too much off the budget?
Oh, that's a loaded question, John. Look, this budget has been done in response to and I know that we hear it all the time, but the unprecedented times that we're actually living in. Am I confident that we will still get messaging out there? Yes, absolutely. I still, however, I believe that there are some more harder to reach areas of our community that this will not touch. But I think we're going to have difficulties reaching out to them anyway. And we need to take a good, long, hard look at how we get out to those communities, particularly if we lose our newspapers, which are on the cards, given where our major media agencies are at the moment anyway. Would I like more? Always. But as you know, it's a chicken and egg situation here.
So can I just, Your Worship, I think, you know, I know the why the question was asked and respect that. I think through today and through the next few days, if you ask any of my staff, they're gonna the response is gonna be, and I think Lisa was probably more diplomatic than what I would have been if I was in her shoes. The response is going to be clearly no. because again, this is not best practice. You know, none of these lines are best practice. So when we get to Kevin's a really good example later with maintenance, you know, if you would ask the same question on any of these budgets, the answer is no, it is not best practice. And there will be people who jump up and down because we will be mowing less and grass will be higher. But that's the target that you've set us. And it's the target that you've set us to be able to achieve the 0% rates increase. So, you know, I employ a team of professionals. They want to do the best thing. Does this budget provide the best thing for them from a professional perspective? Clearly no. And that's why I say it's not sustainable in the long run. So we're looking at it as a 1 year slice. But will anybody, in the philosophy that we've been taking, will anybody die? Will anybody go to jail? The answer again is no and no. Hence you've got this as the starting point.
Through the chair, I still, you know, I understand all that, you know, absolutely. And I think the greatest respect, even pre-COVID, we, you know, communicating with the community it's got to be a two-way thing. I get all that, but I think it's more than just an economic. Okay, all these are not best practice. So I think it's more than economic. With the communication connection in the community, it's more of a social thing. Just people identifying, feel that they're being, you know, so they have some connection with the council. There's enough bad news or negativity out there, and it's not all council's problem. It's sometimes people are selective what they want to know, what they want to hear. But I still believe that, you know, getting back to, I think Kathy made a point about some selective, and Kevin about some selective advertising outside social media, traditional Facebook, because not, you know, even though it is the way of the future, not everybody is doing it, especially the older demographic.
Just through the chair, and again, I've got to do it from a different perspective, because Turangi has always been a little bit out on the limb. I feel through the whole COVID that social media is the only information that Turangi has had. It hasn't had, even though TDC is up and running, it's not been TDC that has, if you like, pushed it. And I think if you came down here and asked people how confident they've been with all the information, I believe that most of them would say that that's where they've got all their information from, through the tip being open, through how you did certain things, through the levels. All of that has been communicated through the power of media. It's not come through papers. It's not come through anywhere else. And that, I know you're going to miss certain people, but you're always going to get that.
I just read the Weekender today, and Weekender, I believe, would be the stronger of the two papers here at the moment, Lisa, and there's just nothing in it. I'll tell you what, they are dead people walking, unfortunately, those two organisations, and unfortunately just the advertisers are not there. So yeah.
What this will do, your worship, it will drive people to create new behaviours.
To
create new behaviours. Yeah,
look at other alternative. But yep, I sort of respect everyone's views. I don't know what to do.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Kirsty.
I've had to jump on my phone because my other one's not working.
Oh, sorry. Nice to see you. How do you guys? What do you look at? Facebook?
Yeah, mostly Facebook.
Yeah.
But the one thing I was thinking that's a little bit to do with advertising, but also just to how we do our rates. We're currently sending them out by paper still.
Yeah,
that's right. I just wonder whether we trial this as doing everything online and making people have that change.
So we'll get to that later. Kirsty, there's a down further, there's a New Zealand Post line there that you'll see, which is mainly the rating invoices. So it's actually on that screen there under Preston Free. And essentially that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we can't force people to do stuff online. We certainly encourage them, and we have a whole program of that, trying to get people online and paying electronically and getting their invoices electronically. But we can't force that, and so we still need to unfortunately do the paper-based invoicing as well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right.
Worship, I'm just conscious that we're on 11 o'clock, which was an hour for this first workshop.
I knew that.
Congratulations, we've done a few lines. We could probably do another, keep going for another sort of 20 minutes or so, but then then we do have other places that we need to be, other meetings, but and then we've got another session this afternoon.
Carry on. So at the moment, I think the general consensus, leave that figure there, Lisa, but if we can sneak a bit out of the system later, we'll try to, but okay. All right, back to Alan. Is it?
Okay, just a general comment. Every cloud has a silver lining. The challenge is finding it. But one of the things that we could come out of this particular approach is we're going to learn some things during the year as to ongoing savings that we've experienced. You know, we're saying that there are a lot of activities here that we are stopping doing from a financial perspective, but hopefully some of those will educate us a bit going forward into the LTP as to future savings that we can lock in. It's not going to be on every line, but on some of these expense accounts, we will learn a bit more about the organisation. So if we keep moving down, catering, conference fees. We have really stopped the organisation attending conferences. Most of that cost there is the local government conference that David and Gareth and one or two councillors attend. But apart from that, there's very little in there for the 300 odd staff to attend any conferences.
So you've you made that decision, or you indicated to us previously that that you were happy with the mayor and one other councillor. I guess in the basis of what we're doing here, I'll be frank, we are asking whether or not that's still the case, whether you still want it to be the mayor and one other. The minimum, which we've done for the rest of the budget, would be the mayor and myself from to be able to get the quorum, or the mayor's delegate to get the quorum at the AGM. But up to you completely.
I think it should just be mayor and CE this year.
Yep, I'd vote for that.
Kevin, I thought at one stage Gareth made comment in one of these link ups about who would be going to the conference, and it would be him. And I think at that time indicated that staff were quite keen just to see one person go. So we had a change of heart.
So that was laying the seeds for today, John, and that your initial conversation that you had in one of those teleconferences was that you wanted two councillors, so to go, so mayor and one other. I guess what we're saying now that you've seen the rest of the budgets and the fact that no other staff are going to anything, just from a leadership perspective, without putting too fine a point on it, from a leadership perspective, I want you to have a rethink about that.
Yeah, through the chair, I think this is probably one line that's could be forgiven, especially in the interim for this year anyway, that reduced to the mayor and CE, or even one elected member, or even the mayor and the CE.
Also, just through the chair, can I ask, we did agree with RMA qualification for a couple of councillors. Where does that sit?
Yeah, so that's in the training line, which we'll get to.
Cool. Okay.
And that still shows the three councillors going to that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Keep going down. Thanks.
So sorry, are we taking? I take from that we're going to take it down from being the mayor and one other councillor to just the mayor. Is that the consensus?
Is everyone happy with that? It's a watered down thing anyway. It's in Wellington now, isn't it? So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that just means it will drop that budget slightly. But yeah, we can do that.
Cool. Okay. Right. Carry on down.
Yeah, okay. With no election, hopefully. Entertainment, there's no such thing. Yep. We've wiped that budget completely. It's another message that we send out to the staff. Levies, there's no change because that's very much to do with our requirements as from a central government perspective. Catering, once again, reduced to the bare minimum. It's quite significant, some of these savings, when you think about it from an operational perspective.
Yeah.
Postage and freight.
Sorry, that one, just the catering one, just as an example, when we talk about staff morale, things like that will have an impact. That's our staff awards and things like that, which we cater. So again, it's the right thing to do at the current time, but we all need to be aware of that. That, as Ellen says, it's a significant thing for the organisation.
And through the chair, it will have an impact on those businesses that we used on a regular basis for those services as well.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
Postage and freight. We have a growing number of ratepayers who have opted in to receive their rates invoices electronically. We have been for a while working on a campaign to encourage that, and also electronic payment, albeit that this particular week we experienced about $30,000 of rates payments in cash, and then you had checks and that as well. So it's taking time, but there is a growing number of ratepayers who are doing things, receiving things electronically. As a result of that, they receive Connect electronically. So yeah, it's moving down that particular path, but it's a slow trip. And in the meantime, New Zealand Post have put up their costs, so we're not actually seeing it flowing through to our expense line quite to that extent. Rents and leases. There's some explanations there as to the reduction. I'll let any of the team talk to any of the areas that they want to in that regard. But there's no savings on the building leases at this stage. But that will probably flow through to future years, depending on the efficiency of the customer experience in the eyesight areas.
Careful, Alan, careful.
Yeah. Travel, here again, reduced to a bare minimum, and that includes the travel by the mayor and any other elected members. So that's just not solely council staff. Based on the state of the economy, we've budgeted for an increase in bad debts. Here again, it's a challenge coming up with a number in that particular area. We've increased by 200,000. It might be 150,000, or it might be 250,000. It's early days as far as what the impact on the market is. If anyone's got any bright ideas in that regard, just feel free to speak. Okay, there's no economists that are here, all right? The rest of it is just pretty much standard processing. So,
sorry, Alan, you just skimmed over the fringe benefit tax. Can you detail what compiles that, please?
Okay, most of that's related to motor vehicles. For example,
salary sacrifice vehicles?
Yeah, salary sacrifice. And in addition to that, there are some FPT liabilities as far as some of our work vehicles, where we've got a employee will take one home, like you take a building inspector, for example, rather than come in each morning and get a vehicle and then go out and do an inspection and then drop the vehicle back and head on home. It's more efficient for us to have them take the vehicle home in the first place, so they can head straight out in the morning to do inspections.
I hear that, Alan. I guess my concern is around the vehicles. Like, those are people that are working as an office out of their vehicle. I think that this is potentially a line that could be looked at, and the policy around vehicles and fringe benefit tax and salary sacrifice could be a huge area of savings for the council.
So if I can probably address that really quickly, particularly the salary sacrifice. It actually isn't a saving. So it's whether or not you contractually, whether or not it's in FBT and fuel and maintenance of vehicles, or not, will make no difference, because it's a cost neutral situation. But the way that our salary sacrifice works is that, take my vehicle as an example. I purchase a vehicle, council purchases a vehicle. I sacrifice a percentage of my salary. It's a dollar amount, which covers the cost of that vehicle, purchase cost of that vehicle over a 3-year period, the running cost of that vehicle, including FBT. If I give that vehicle back, then I'm contractually entitled to get that money back, because that's my salary. So my salary point is here, and then it's less here.
Yeah, so my challenge to that, Gareth, is that if we're using your salary as an example, is we take your salary against a national average, and then we pay you to that. So if we've salary sacrificed there, doesn't that leave a gap?
No,
so if
no,
we
because
were
the car's included in that. So the total REM is the total cost of my employment, and then the car comes off that. So if I don't have the car, then my salary goes back up to that level. So it actually would cost more, because then I would still need a car that you'd need to provide me to go to different meetings and stuff like that. So we would then need to provide another car, but regardless, that dollar amount stays the same.
So in our personal cost is the gross cost. So if there is a salary sacrifice, it's still a debit against the personnel cost and a credit against the vehicle running costs. And then that credit gets hit by FBT, by petrol, by maintenance, by everything else. But the actual personnel cost is always the gross amount.
So it's a completely cost neutral, well, it's basically a cost neutral transaction. As I say, we actually probably save money, because it means we can have less fleet cars, which we would otherwise have to have. But otherwise, it's a cost neutral situation.
Through the chair, could I ask the question? I noticed that if we're looking at a 20% reduction in building consent fees, etc., and or equal to a 10% reduction, but 234,000 saving, what would the fringe benefit tax savings be if those people still had to, like the building inspectors, etc.? Would they be able to recoup that lost, given the fact that there's not going to be as many inspections, if we're looking at a reduction in building consents, for those inspectors and others that take their vehicles home to leave those vehicles in the car pound? Would there be a cost neutral situation there, or would we be making a saving?
Well, we'll look at that as the year evolves. For example, at the moment, we are saying there's only allowed to be one staff member in a vehicle because of social distancing type of scenario. So on one hand, there might be some savings. On the other hand, there's increased costs.
And we've budgeted for, again, without getting too respecting the confidentiality issues around staff, we've put it this way, we've certainly budgeted for less vehicles. So we've had a good look at our fleet generally and have reduced our vehicles down, and then that will have an impact on the other running costs as well. And you'll see when we get to the fuel line and things like that, we've reduced that down on the basis of less trips, both regionally and locally.
But my question was, are we likely to make savings for the inconvenience of someone driving to the town to pick up a car rather than taking it from home?
Right. So yeah, whether or not it's worthwhile doing anyway for those ones. I
think too, with the personal use vehicles, Gareth, I'd really like to see a look at what those vehicles are. I mean, a standard 4-cylinder sedan is a heck of a lot cheaper to run than some of the vehicles that I've seen on the list that's out there.
So again, Kylie, that's done through a all government contract, and the amount that you sacrifice is based on the type of vehicle. So again, it's cost neutral. In theory, having a big V8 would not cost council any more than a electric vehicle would in terms of this, because there would be less salary that person would sacrifice. So it's budgeted on that whole of
a public perception and public.
And that's why we don't allow that to occur. That's exactly why we don't allow that to occur. But I guess the message is, and we can certainly show you the workings, the message is that it's a cost neutral situation, that whatever the purchase price of the vehicle and whatever the running cost of the vehicle, it's allocated through that formula back through, so that it doesn't cost the ratepayer any more. What it does is it gives the employee less money in their bank every fortnight, but gives them a car in their driveway.
Jim, could I just make comment on that particular issue, because I took an interest in it some time ago, and Kylie, I fully support what you were saying. We've got 19 of those sorts of vehicles involved, and what I found interesting when we looked at the fringe benefit tax, particularly on, David, on your car, I think the salary sacrifice was less than the fringe benefit tax. So I'm fully open, and I've got the prices here. I've got the one to do with the various categories that you're in and what you can actually spend on a particular vehicle. But I'm also interested in the fact that a lot of these, and I use the word private car, doesn't have a Taupo District Council logo. If it does that alleviate the fringe benefit tax? What's the reason that there's no identification on those cars?
So again, they are treated as private cars, and again, this is an account and it's money in, money out. So yes, council owns the cars. If every one of us that had one of those cars was to hand them back, the net cost to council would increase, because you'd have to get more fleet cars into the fleet to be able to get us around to our meetings, etc., that we're requiring to have. So again, the net cost, the key thing is that the net cost is zero to council.
Well, sorry, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship, let's have a look at that, because on the list of the 19 vehicles I have here, the most expensive purchase was 72,626, and yet under tier 1, a hybrid, it can only go up to 69. So I think it's a good area to have a look at, particularly as we go forward. And I take Alan's comment about at the moment 1 staff member per car, but it may be an area, particularly when we also then get into the salary tiers. Does that affect that tier that that person should or shouldn't be in? So I'm very interested in the next few months doing something.
So I'm not prepared to talk about the salary tiers. That's completely a management issue, and not one that I'll enter into here. The one around cars, more than happy to have that outside of this conversation, outside of here. What I'll say is, I think we're out of time now for the session. Again, I don't want to labour it, but in terms of this annual plan, you're not going to make any savings. I'm happy for us to do this through a workshop situation later, and we'll work through all the figures. But frankly, you're not going to make any savings in this annual plan by focusing on that area. And there's a lot of places that you will make savings from. And so, yes, let's have that conversation, but it's not an urgent one as part of this annual plan, because it's not going to make any difference.
Agreed, Gareth, but it's worth looking at going forward. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Where have we got to, Alan?
We're
zooming
down
out.
to, yeah, we've finished that section of general admin cost savings of 624,000. So maybe it's an opportunity to have a break now.
Yes, through the chair, I need to go. I've got a lunch date at Plato, sorry.
Okay, so what time are we back on, Shani? Is it this afternoon? Have we got anything today or no?
2 o'clock, Your Worship, you're back.
2 o'clock this afternoon, that's what I thought, yeah. Okay, all right, everyone, thank you very much, and we will carry on at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.